Welcome to the Essentially You podcast. Shireen, how are you doing today?
I am doing very well. Excited to be on your podcast.
I am so happy to have you. I just want a little confession to everyone listening. We have been talking for almost an hour, the hour that we were slotted to do this interview, because Shireen, you are just a light being that I cannot wait to dive into this conversation today. And I want to start with your story because you have such a just a beautiful, full. I mean, the things that you have accomplished, I am just in awe and so inspired. But I would love, we're going to be talking about your story today, and particularly kind of what was that defining moment for you that led you to write your upcoming book, Free to Be, and really a guide to authentic fulfillment, because I think that's what we all want, right?
Yes, the title of the book is Free to Be, and the tagline is a 6-week guide to reclaiming your soul.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
I began my soul journey at the end of 2013. I went through a major breakup with my partner at the time. We were together for 13 years. We'd been good friends for 9 years prior to that. And the 22 years of friendship, partnership, love, commitment vanished within 20 minutes. And that really propelled me into, I'd like to say that's what propelled me into soul seeking, but truthfully, it propelled me into a abyss of nothing. Like I was like suddenly I was in a massive amount of pain and a lot of darkness, and I did not understand why. Like I had everything I that defines success. So I'm like, okay, this is not just a matter of a broken heart. Everything feels broken. And why? Like, why? I shouldn't feel this undone, you know? And I set out to find out why. And it was somewhat challenging in that I still had to do everything that I was doing. And my kids were 5 and 7 at the time, but I made it my priority. And for 6 years, I looked in every nook and cranny, and I sat with my demons, and I call it my magical mystery ride. I mean, there was so many aha moments and so many times where I was just flat on the floor, or like in the corner of a room talking to one of my besties for 3 hours, who is, like it was intense. And at the end of the 6 years, where I really began to see the light, I mean, I continued, I had aha moments and I would see glimpses of the light, but it really did take 6 years to right my ship, so to speak. And in reflection, I realized that if I knew what I was doing when I was at that crossroad, that the process that I had actually gone through a process without knowing it. And I realized that those 6 years could really be distilled into 6 weeks. So I basically wrote the book that I wish I had when I was at that crossroad and on my knees. Though you certainly, one does not need to be on their knees in order to benefit from reading the book. It's just that I think I joke that, I do my best work when I'm on my knees, because that's when we're the most vulnerable. That's the most, ego takes a back seat and you're just like, WTF, something needs to shift. My motto in the early days, I kid you not, was better than this. Hashtag better than this. And the thought was if the next minute, hour, day, week was better than the last, that was an improvement. And so tiny, tiny, tiny little steps in these 6 years. And again, which was profound and transforming for me. And I distilled it into 6 weeks. And you're welcome.
Powerful. Well, I was just thinking about when you started off in explaining that moment where, this relationship and everything in 20 minutes. I just took this deep breath, and I have a feeling that everyone who was listening did the exact same thing. I was like, oh my gosh, because we've had an experience similar, something like that gut punch moment of like, how do I pick myself up? I don't know. How do I navigate moving forward? Everything is up for review. You know, everything's up for review. In all of your patterns, all the things that just keep coming around are just available for review in that moment. It would be so lovely to have a framework for, because it's going to happen. We were talking earlier today about, even this year, for you, and how you were like, it was going to be like this, it was going this way, and then these curveballs came in, and thank goodness I've got this process that I can walk myself through, where it's not going to ever be another 6 years. And there's so many people right now who are in their 6 year process and are just looking for the lifeline to find their way out. And that is exactly what this book is all about.
And I think that even if you're not dealing with a crisis, so many people live a muted life, without even realizing that they're living a muted life. Like there might be something whispering in the background, like you're not living your full purpose or, as passionately as you can. But either we don't hear it or we don't listen to it, I think anyone who feels that way could also benefit, because truly what the book is about is a practical means to finding one's soul. And then once we reconnect and reclaim it, what we do with it. That is it.
Well, let's talk about that, because I know people are wondering, well, what exactly does that mean? And you're absolutely right. There are so many women listening to this where there is a whisper of like, there's more for me here.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just kind of in the monotony of day to day, but I know that there's more.
Yeah.
And how do I step into the more? How do I identify what that is for me? How do I move out of this monotony of the day to day and just getting caught up in the obligations and the stuff and the drama of my life and find something more?
Yeah, it's really a matter. I mean, the first step really is the excavation, the clearing of the slate. Because what happens, and I mean, there's science behind it too, in that they say that we disassociate to
Yep.
different degrees when we are quite young. So we, as babies and toddlers, we're full of life, full of joie de vivre. Our soul is singing. And then depending on the situation and to the degree of the dissociation, we separate from our souls. And then what happens? So instead of taking our cues from the inside, we start taking it from the outside, right? So you talk about, being busy with all the busy work of life. I mean, that's pretty much what starts setting in at 5 years old. You learn to play by the rules and like, oh, I need to get the A, to make mom and dad happy and the teacher happy, and in order to go to second grade, and then I need to do this and I need to do that. And then, the teen years, and we start adulting and more responsibility and all of that. So layers and layers and layers of stuff. And then people are like, oh, follow your passion. And you're like, because you've spent so many years doing what you believe that you should be doing in
Other
order
people
to,
wanted you to do
yeah. And
whatever
so,
to appease your parents or to find
correct.
worth,
Correct.
something.
It's very rare. And this is why I think that artists, and not all artists, are very unique in that way, because they're choosing otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That the core, their inner star is still speaking through them, and musicians will call it, being in the flow. Well, what is that? That's just your soul, like living out loud. But most of us don't do
We're not
that.
in our flow.
So,
I mean, we never known
well,
what to be in our flow is.
correct. Well, that's it. I mean,
We
people say,
forgot
like, follow
as
your
3-year-olds.
bliss. It's
Yeah.
like, where is my bliss? What is it? So the first part of it, and the first half of the book, is literally clearing your slate, clearing your runway, so you can actually find your soul.
Shireen, do you mind if I ask, is it through query? Is it through questions that you move us through this?
Mm.
Because I know even, some of the women who are listening right now, a question that I even pose is like, what do you love? What brings you joy? Because so often we've lost ourselves in family and
It's actually even more practical and how to than that. I wrote the book very intentionally. So the structure of the book is very intentional. And one of the intentions is to have it be experiential rather than conceptual. Like you hear something, you're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And then you actually live it. It's the difference between being in the passenger side and watching somebody drive and then getting behind the wheel. Like it's
totally different.
You're
Totally
sitting
different.
right next to each other, but it's a very, very different experience. So I wanted it to be experiential. And so there are exercises throughout the book every week. And again, I deliberately structured it the way I structured it because, and I'll quickly go through the chapters if I may, which is
Yes, please.
basically a chapter a week. But the idea really is, and even like part one, so it's 6 weeks. So part one is the first 3 weeks. Part two is the second 3 weeks, each one. So 21 days and 21 days. And there are some, studies about how habits are made or broken within 21 days. It's not exactly that cookie cutter, but that is also kind of a subliminal intention in the background. So the first week is all about brain detox. And I start there because if my process taught me anything, is that our brains are fantastic COOs. They should never be CEOs of us. They should never, ever, ever drive the bus. Really. They should be tasked with something that they can carry out. And sometimes they have great ideas and such, but our brains default to the negative. There's studies that say that it's somewhere between 70 to 80%. And then 95, up to 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. So we have bad thoughts
and they
that
repeat themselves.
they repeat themselves. And then what do? We add new content to it. And the content, and I talk about this significantly in the first chapter, the content is not good. I talk about infoxication, which is content overload, which we all have because we're on screens the majority of our days. And so just consuming. And social media, especially, has become a Frankenstein of sorts in that it will also give you the information it thinks you need, which is, has been fundamental in creating the polarity that we have in our country now, which I won't go to. So we are getting information that is added on to our negative, repetitive thoughts. And it is up to us to, one, minimize the information coming in, and two, to really realize that we are the ones having thoughts and our thoughts don't have us. And once you have that realization, once you're able to step out of our stream of thinking and to a space that's called, people call it awareness, consciousness, and be able to have that distinction, there is tremendous freedom around it. Because now when I get stuck in a certain way of thinking, I'm like, I step back and I'm like, just a thought. Doesn't mean that it's real. Doesn't mean that it's reality. And I could choose something different. And that aha moment was one of the biggest moments in my process. A lot about the mind and how we should manage it. I have a section on the amygdala, which I call Amy G. Dalla. And Amy and I have had a love-hate relationship. So some humor in there.
She's just trying to, she's trying to extra protect
all the time.
All the time. Stranger danger. Oh my God.
Watch out for that. Watch out for me. Don't do this. Yeah. So she just needs to sit at the back of the bus a lot of times.
A lot.
So week one is all about detoxing our mind. Week two is about detoxing our hearts. And that's really about how we take care of our heart. We tend to task our hearts with the wrong things. Like people say follow your heart. I think it's a total misnomer. I call it the heart, and it's often referred to as our inner child. I call it our inner puppy.
I love that.
Because all it wants is to be cared for, to be loved, to be acknowledged. That is it. And the heart is super fickle, right? It wants ice cream in 1 hour, then it wants a nap. It likes one thing, then it doesn't like one thing. And that's what the heart does, right? It gets angry, it gets upset, all that stuff. And great. Tend to it, pay attention to it, see what those emotions are about. But don't confuse it with your soul. And so there's shifting our relationship with our heart and not overtasking it. And then also really guarding it from situations and people as well. So that's really week 2 of the book. And week 3 is about detoxing our body. And again, not just by eating better, sleeping better, exercising better, but also shifting our relationship with our bodies as the only vessel through life. And again, I give some very practical tips and exercises that we could do. But it's, there's basically 2 things that we default to when relating to our bodies. We either ignore our bodies,
Right.
kind of expect it to come along as we're doing whatever we're doing.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, it can be very inconvenient when our body doesn't want to do the thing or doesn't have the energy for the thing that we need to still do.
Right. But
So,
it's like, come on, let's go,
yeah,
and
exactly.
or we abuse it, you're too
Yeah.
fat, you're too old, so shifting all of that. So the idea is that when you detox your mind, your body, your heart as a natural byproduct, once you lift all of the stuff, the layers, the schmutz
Yeah.
that is on top, then your soul can breathe and be like, hey, here I am.
Somewhere buried in the
Been
big
waiting for
pile
a
of
while.
laundry you haven't done in 50 years or
Correct.
whatever.
Finding one's soul is truly becomes a byproduct of that detoxing and being very intentional. And then part 2, week 4 is my favorite because it's all about play, adult play, as in doing cartwheels in your backyard, wearing different costumes and doing role play like you would as a kid, or reading your favorite children's book, swinging on swings, dancing. It could be, and there's 8 different play personality types, which I talk about. And some of them were usually a combination of a few of them. I'm a combination of 3 of them. And then there's ones that just don't resonate with me. So depending on your play personality type, there's various play activities, which I talk about in the book. Week 5 is all about getting in touch with your true north. I think people often confuse soul and spirit. The whole spiritual realm is super fuzzy, and it's no wonder that it's often confused with the woo woo or religion, but it's really not. It's truly about spiritual wellness and spiritual health. And people tend to confuse our souls, which I believe is our unique imprint in this world, in this universe, no other like it. And then the higher consciousness, universal energy, God, whatever you want to call it, is the spirit that connects all of us. So week 5 is all about the dance between the spirit and the soul.
Mm.
And week 6 is about rewriting your story. And again, super practical. Like I have a Venn diagram for it. And, so it isn't like, hey, good luck. It's literally a step by step of creating the life you want. And it's really important for me that people get that the emphasis isn't on being better organized or more productive and all of that. Like there is a huge step that we are all missing, which is, are you living your life from the inside out? Are you a supernova? Like your star is just bursting, 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 and you're living that out? or are you just living a life that you are supposed to, or you think that you're supposed to live? And
Mm.
that's a huge distinction.
As I'm processing all of it, I love how you break it all down, and I think that the way that you break it down from week one all the way down to up into week six, it's the process that we need to go through. We need to do the clearing of all these. I think it's like 80,000 thoughts. Again, like you said, 85% of those are negative, and then they're repeating, and we get caught up in those. And you're right. There's the CEO is not the role for our brain. Like a lot of us were given this beautiful brain, but there was no instructions on how to use it. Like,
Yeah.
how to really leverage it for our soul's purpose or our higher selves purpose, and really what we were here to come and create. And then I love the way that you think about tending, or the way that you work us through tending to our heart. And I was curious, I know that I'm probably in week one is, I know the ego was a major player here too. And the always the need to be right, or like, oh, I've been wronged. And, just the ego always just trying to get attention and just kind of fighting for position, and learning how to quiet that. I know that that's that awareness that you were talking about as well. The things that kind of get in our way, and
Mhm.
in really finding our truest purpose. One of the things that really spoke to me that I find I'll never forget when I first read that we are not our thoughts, and
Mhm.
that we've got to create that buffer room so that we're not reactive,
Mhm.
that we give ourselves an opportunity to show up from our higher selves, or our adult selves, or our soul driven selves. And I remember thinking, like, how am I ever going to become aware of my thoughts?
Mhm.
And do you speak into the practice of that? Because as I've been in practice of that for years now,
Mhm.
it's really fascinating how, those reactive thoughts or those trigger thoughts, they still come, they're still there, especially when I'm at my weakest moments, like if I'm super tired, or I'm sick and I'm still trying to operate in the world as a mom and a partner. Then those little things will start to pop up. Something like, one of the things that come up, my patterning is that, no one's helping me. No one's helping you. You got to do it yourself. Ooh, it's one of my it's hard grooved, man. In my worst moments always is like, yeah,
Mhm.
well,
There it is.
look, there's the proof. Here we are again. Isn't
Yep.
this true? That I know that's got to be a lot of those, that first 21 days is trying to kind of rewire or get above the ego and get above our patternings and our limiting beliefs. And do you walk us through in terms of, just kind of just become showing us how to be more aware of those types of things that
Oh,
keep
yeah.
coming up?
I mean, in everything that I talked about, there is a step by step, because I don't want it to be a woo woo book where it's just like, live your best life,
You
like,
wrote this book for me, like these practical, that I'm like, I need action, like I need the experience to move myself through. There's so many conceptual books out there that don't give us the blueprint on how to take action on those things. Like I remember reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and I was like, huh, well, this is great, but how do I actually do any of that? Like, I have no idea. Like,
yeah.
he might as well be saying I need to become an alien to be
Yeah,
able to do
yeah. I
this.
mean, and they are beautiful books. I mean, I've
Yeah,
read so many of them, and there's a lot of takeaways from that. But like,
absolutely.
if somebody wants a shift, then that's why, like, the likes of The Artist's Way is really good, because it's like, hey, you want to go there? Let me take your hand. Let me take your hand and move you through, because I went through it and it was really effective, and hopefully it will resonate with you. That's a very different. I mean, I think that any inspirational, motivational book that resonates with anyone is worth a read, but the how to is often missing, and it's not necessarily practical. So for me, it was really important to create practical steps so that, whether you're a busy mom or a major executive, it could be woven into the day to day. And what's really interesting to me is, frankly, that, it's like, if you want to change your diet, you research what the best diets is, like, oh, Mediterranean diet is really good for us. Okay, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to change, I'm going to, whatever it is, you take those steps for a better diet. You want to work out, you go to the gym and you figure out a exercise plan that works for you. What works for Joe over on the treadmill may not necessarily work for you. If you feel like, you're having mental issues, you'll go to a therapist. But then when people like spirituality, quote unquote, I don't even like that term. I like spiritual wellness or spiritual health. It's like anybody's get, like there is no true guide. It's not turned into practical steps. And I think there's a need for that, which
There's a
hopefully.
desperate need for that, especially, I always tell people I serve everybody by serving women. And I guess we are, who's got all the hats, who's got the mental bandwidth of where did my son and husband put their things. I just like, everyone's like, mom better know where it all is. And guess what? I do, and the thoughts that come up of, it's just the constantness, and at this end and also focusing on my soul's purpose. We've got to have those practical steps that move us through the ascension of getting there.
Yeah. And I want to add that the beauty of getting in touch with one's soul, reclaiming it, I liken it to balance. This is why I mentioned, you talk about flow to musicians. They know it instantly and they know when they're in it, like instantly, because they know that visceral feeling. So when you tap into your soul, when you connect with your soul, you know it, you feel it. And
Mhm.
then the same way that you get on a bike and you instantly recall what balance is, and without thinking about it, it's rote. It happens. It's the same with reclaiming one soul. At least that has been my experience and the experience of those who've read the book and have done the process. It's in you. So it isn't that you have to remind yourself. I mean, sometimes we all
Deviate a
go
little
off
bit. Yeah.
course. And frankly, the only time that I know that I'm not on my course is when I am off of it, where I'm like, oh, something is off. And I
Mhm.
stop and recenter. But otherwise, like right now, I'm in it. I'm in my flow, and there's a beauty in that. Energy, it's a connectedness, it's an aliveness, and the world is going to be what it is, and it's not easy. It's not like you go through the 6-week process and suddenly it's like butterflies and rainbows. It's the same world, but it's how you dance with it, it's how you meet, it's
Mhm.
how you react or not react, that makes all the difference.
I think you said it so beautifully. And every time you talk about kind of that flow, because I know that there's a lot of people who've never even felt it.
Mhm.
They don't know. I always think of the Disney movie Soul on Pixar, where you can feel that,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
there's that flow zone, or just like they're just in another place when
You
they're
know,
so
and,
in their
and
flow.
it's funny that you talk about Pixar because I have a few friends that work there. And also, one of my very favorite movies, and I mention it in the book, is Inside Out. Like, that
Hmm.
is such a profound film, animation. I mean, it's incredible because it's pretty much saying what my book says in a very different way, you
Yes,
know, but
yes.
but like feeling all the feels, like joy realizes it needs sadness. I mean, like, oh my God. I remember sitting there because I went to a lot of, Disney movies and such with my kids. And I would sit there and like, oh, that's really sweet, eating my popcorn. And Inside Out, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like the genius. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and all the emotions and the thoughts again, like the orchestra of, like, again, not being the CEO, like having a soul that's able to kind of delineate. But it's an incredible movie that really gives you a good sense of kind of what's going on inside of our, and kind of tending to our heart, really, kind of that chapter two, that second week, sorry, the second week of the program. Another question I had, which I found was really interesting, is in week 4 was play. and the play archetypes. And I was curious, as you were kind of working through the process in those 6 years, and play came up, was there resistance initially to that play, or did you find that you needed to rediscover it?
Yeah, yeah, a lot of rediscovery, no resistance. I
Oh,
mean, it
good.
was sort of like literally life knocking on my door and like, can you come out and play? You know what I mean? I was like, yeah, I can. And it's interesting because I discovered the book Play by Stuart Brown, and I had the privilege of spending an afternoon with him when I was writing the book. And I have this play idea, which hopefully will come to fruition at some point, which he loved. And I can't even remember how I happened upon the book. And it may have been listening to his TED talk. And then I looked up the book because watch a lot of TED talks and other videos and such. And this one just really resonated with me. And I'm like, oh my God, I can play. Like I can play. And also realizing the times that I have played as an adult, but haven't really considered it play. And really redefining that for ourselves, because what we consider play mostly, I mean, what is it? It's like going to dinner with friends, or going to a bar, and that, it's usually alcohol consumption, and then what do you end up talking about? It's either relationships or work, or kids, which is not play, you
Mm-mm.
know. And again, playing as in, like cartwheels. When was the last time you did cartwheels, or somersaults, or whatever it is that brings you joy? So the discovery of that and figuring out what it is for me, like just really quickly, I'm a combination of three play personality types. One of them is creative. So I find tremendous joy in creating things, and it helps me be in my flow. I'm also, there's the joker personality. I don't like pranking people, but I love, kind of messing with people and making things light and joking around and stuff. And then the adventure, I avid traveler. And when I get to combine those three, oh my God,
Mhm.
which often happens when I'm traveling,
Mhm.
I'm in heaven. But play can
Mhm.
also happen. It's like you could take 3 minutes out and play.
Mm.
So it's important to figure out the play personality type. And I'm telling you, like, can I just say really quickly, when even before I defined it, when I was running a series for, I think that one was the Discovery Network, and I had my team, and my team ended up getting used to it. Like they just knew what was going on. But I had the production assistant buy a disco ball and put it in the middle of the room. And if I felt the stress level went too high at any given, like people could be in a meeting, on a call, or whatever, he would turn off the light. I would just cue him. I would put on the music, and the disco ball would go on. And they would all have to get up. We'd all meet in the middle, and we would dance our butts off up until the time I felt the energy change. And literally, like, turn the music off, turn it back on, and everybody goes back. But you could just feel it because everyone's lighter and happier. Why? Because they've had whatever, 5, 10, 15 minutes of playing, and it makes all the difference.
Mhm. Yeah, play and connection too. Like, because there's connection aspect of that where oxytocin, kind of kicks in. It's the one hormone that can trump cortisol. She can just put cortisol in her place. And so I love that because you're dancing together and everyone's, there's like this connection and that play. Kind of how you described the different, like, stacking your play archetypes, but like doing the things that you love. A friend of mine calls it pleasure stacking, where you are like maybe it's maybe that's not play, but play would be like, oh, it's a dance party and you're wearing it's a costume dance party.
Totally.
And there's like some other component to it that brings it in, that ends up becoming this like pleasure stack. But yeah, I bet travel is where you can really stack a lot of those things all at once. And it feels so good. Like that spontaneous joy that can happen in those moments is
That's
just
what it
really.
is too. So the only rule of play is to do so without purpose to do it. I mean, the intention there is to obviously play, but to intentionally play unintentionally.
I love it. I
Yeah.
just recently had Dr. Thamit Sethi, who wrote Joy is My Justice. And we talked a lot about cultivating joy, play being one of those ways, because that just feels so good. And it's just another tangent, but like, we get to have that too and be in our soul's purpose. And so, and the last question I really have for you, it's being in that flow of like, 'cause I mean, outside of joy and connection and deep friendships, a sense of purpose, that we're connected into our soul and we're doing the work that we're here to do, that fires us up, that like has us in the flow. I know that you talked a little bit about, there's a structure to it, like kind of figuring out what that is, but it's the feeling that I really attribute to knowing when I'm in it. Like when I'm, after our interview, like my work in the world, my flow in the world is to really, help women optimize their health and their health and well-being in a way, like their metabolic health, that they're firing on all cylinders, that they are living their purpose, so that the obstacle of health issues or hormone issues, they're moved aside so they can really do the work that they're meant to do in the world. And anytime I'm curating content or I'm ideating for the podcast or I'm working on a book proposal, like I'm just like, I'm so in my flow. I'm like, this is what I'm meant to do in the world. Like this is what I was put on this earth to do. And I
Yeah.
know it. And every time people talk to me about it, they're like, obviously, this is what you were meant to do. Like your passion for this is so crazy. And so I know what that feeling is to pull from. Like I feel it right now as I'm telling you about it. Well, I love it. But is there anything else that helps us identify that we have found it, that we know what that is? I always just attribute it to a feeling, and that I feverishly can't stop doing it.
For me, it's really it's like I just thought of the book Seated Soul,
Mm,
because it really is that. It's a very visceral feeling. It's like constant inner contentment
mm,
and fulfillment. And again, I almost don't want to say that, because then people are like, oh, I'm going to do this process, and every second of my life I'm going to feel fulfilled and content. And it's not that way, because again, we meet the world
yes.
and the world isn't structured that way. Maybe we can all collectively shift it closer to that, but it's what's lying underneath, so that instead of excavating, for 3 weeks in order to hopefully find, your soul, that inner star, that it is consistently there, and it is within an arm's reach, even if it isn't glowing that morning.
Mm. Well, I love how you said how you're away from it. The way you know that you're off center from it is when you've deviated. Like you can feel that. And then I think it's like maybe, like you said, a North Star, but maybe a going home to. Like there's,
Well, the North Star is different, because
mhm,
I feel like that's our inner star. North
okay.
Star is what I consider spirit. It's like our higher consciousness. Our higher consciousness is different than our souls, in that the higher consciousness is the
The
spirit, the universal
collective, the
energy,
whole, yeah.
exactly. Whereas in our soul is unique. And once your soul is connected to that higher consciousness, I mean, that's when the true dance begins.
Mm,
And I mean, the feeling is, it's like that feeling of being, like you said, connected and in love. And actually in loveness is actually a really good, it's like being in love with yourself, your soul, your inner star. And again, the feeling does not go away. It may be a little more pronounced on some days and a little less, but either you wake up feeling it, or again, it's at an arm's reach. It's not very far.
mm.
It's
I so
it,
appreciate, oh yeah.
the distinctions. I think the distinctions are really important. distinguishing the difference between heart and mind and body and not confusing one for the other, which sounds a little silly, but we really do. And it makes sense once you read the book. So those distinctions, like, oh, this is my body wanting such and such, and then really sitting with it and getting the guidance from our soul rather than trying to think it out, or having all sorts of emotions around it or whatever it is. So having distinctions, being able to name things and putting them in their place is super important.
That clarity is, I'm so glad I asked, because I just got a better breath of kind of what it is. Because I know as we're listening, as people are listening, trying to just kind of get clarity. Obviously, it's the book we need. And the last little question, this is more of a logistical question. So I highly recommend everyone get the hard copy. But as a mama on the go, I mean, all the time, 24/7, is it also going to be on Audible? Is it going to be available? Okay. Yes. So I'm a yes. I'm a yes. Get it on Audible and get the hard copy, because I know that this book is experiential. So when it comes to experiential books, you got to have it. You got to have
Yeah,
physical
I
copy.
do. I do. And everybody, reads and listens different, but I do the Kindle audiobook Audible mix so that I can
Hmm.
be in the car and listen to something. And when it ends, and if I pick up my Kindle, it starts at the same place, which is genius.
I didn't even know that. I
The
always go
the Kindle
Audible hard
version
copy.
and the print version are available for pre-sale now. Like, you could click on it now and buy it. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and a few other platforms. The audiobook, I believe, is going to come out closer to the print date. I don't know if they have, it might just be on the print date. It's the pub date, which is June 20th. But the book and Kindle version can be
You can get it right now. Right
right
now.
now.
Right now.
Click,
You can go
click,
get it right
click.
now.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for so often I have incredible women such as yourself on the show, but we don't get a really good sense of the breadth of the journey of what we're going to go through. And I just thank you for walking us through it, because I have so much anticipation, even though I know, I mean, because I know there's more work for me to do. I know that although I'm very connected into, my soul's purpose, I still know that I absolutely need the first 21 days. What I'm like? I just, the clearing of, the brain detox and the, all of it. I mean, even if we've done the work, we always need a repeat of it. And so thank you so much for, the journey that you had to go through to get this book out into the world. Thank you. And thank you for the vulnerability of putting it out there for us as well. And then the structure and the practicality of actually doing the work so that we can come on the other side. Like, what I feel is going to happen is who you are on day one of the 6 weeks is not who you're going to be on at the end. If anything, you're going to find who you truly are at the end of the 6 weeks. And that is probably one of the most beautiful gifts anyone can give themselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the great conversation, the recorded and the unrecorded.
Yes. And congratulations again. I'm so excited to get everyone get this book. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited to go through the journey myself, because it sounds like such an epic journey to just come home to yourself. Thank you.